knowing that there's many concerned people in the community. That's a blessing to me to see you all take time out of your schedule to come out and hear the facts about AB 329. So thank you so much. My name is Tim Thompson. I'm pastor at 412 Church in Marietta, and also the president of a organization called Our Watch, and we are working together with Informed Parents of California and Protect Our Kids to bring this evening to you tonight. So wanted to let you know we are going to have several speakers come up tonight. These are professionals in each of their fields, and you guys are going to be blessed to hear from each of them. And a lot of misinformation being spread all over the state right now about AB 329. So our hope and our goal tonight is to bring in these professional people in their fields to dispel some of the myths that are going on and really represent to you the truth about the law, the truth about the curriculum, and basically give you the information you need to make good decisions for your families. So thank you so much again for coming out tonight. First, what we want to do is talk about public education and parental rights. And to do that, I want to invite up Pastor Mark Schneider. Pastor Mark Schneider is the founder of Protect Our Kids Project within Church United. He is an engineer, lawyer who has served as corporate counsel and in an executive positions at several large technology companies before going into private practice. In response to Proposition 8, which fought to preserve traditional marriage in California, Mark established a Salt and Light ministry at Calvary Chapel, East Anaheim, where he still serves. Mark has published Law Review and other articles that touch on the intersection of law, theology, and culture, including a book entitled A Manual for Christian Citizenship. A native Californian, Mark is married with 2 grown children. Please welcome up Pastor Mark Schneider.
Thank you, Pastor Tim, and thank you, Western Christian Schools, for hosting this event. Well, you're going to be hearing a lot about AB 329 tonight, probably a lot more than you want to. But before we get started in the law, some context is probably in order, some historical context. One of the things that we're going to be focusing on is what's called the framework. It's put out by the California Department of Education. It's a 1,000-page long document that sort of gives the principles and guidelines for how the curriculum under AB 329 is going to be rolled out. But before we get into that, I'd like to call our attention to another framework. And this one's a lot older than the CDE framework. And fortunately, it's much shorter as well. You probably know it. It's known as the Declaration of Independence. And it goes something like this. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. What is meant by unalienable? Well, that's a right that's not transferable. You can't give it away because it's given to you by God. And the government's job is to protect those unalienable rights. The question for us tonight, and one I think you should ponder as you listen to this material, is parenting an unalienable right? Do you have the right to parent your children and imbue them with the values that you hold dear?
The state needs to be the ultimate guarantor of a child's well-being. There's just no alternative to that. The reason parent-child relationships exist is because the state confers legal parenthood on people through its paternity and maternity laws. It's the state that is empowering parents to do anything with children, to take them home, to have custody, and to make any kind of decisions about that.
Did you hear that? It's the state that empowers you to have custody of your children. Well, unfortunately, we're here tonight because increasing numbers of people have come to believe that your right to raise your children is subordinate to the state, who may have a worldview that's very foreign to your own. And as you're going to learn, we've come a long way from the vision of our founders, men like John Adams, who said, public virtue cannot exist in a nation without private virtue. and public virtue is the only foundation for republics. Today, talk of concepts like virtue is kind of an anachronism. We view it as sort of a quaint notion. But it may surprise you to know that that was the primary purpose of American education for the first 200 years of our existence. Education was privatized, and however foreign it appears to modern Americans, for at least the first 200 years of American culture, the primary mediums for education were all biblically based, where the vehicles of education included books like the Blueback Speller, the New England Primer, and McGuffey's Reader, which is still around today and has sold over 120 million copies. The focus on education was offering children what we now call a classical education, merging the transcendent truths that come from Jerusalem with the logical reasoning from Athens, where it was common for students to learn, along with moral lessons, Latin, Greek, logic, and the great classics of Western civilization, including Aristotle, Plato, Shakespeare, and on and on. But times changed. There are many factors that caused a shift in American education, but two men in particular were very influential. These guys. The first was Horace Mann. He was a Unitarian, and Mann was the first Secretary of Education in the state of Massachusetts, and it was Mann who first formally came up with the idea of public education, what he called the normal school. He had two goals: to bring uniformity to education. All kids should be taught exactly the same thing. And number two, and more importantly, it must be brought under government control. Mann paved the way for the second man, John Dewey, who is known today as the father of progressive education. He was a signer of the first Humanist Manifesto, which formally challenged the basis of Western civilization and its reliance on ethical monotheism. As for education, Dewey said, well, it must be regulated to bring about what he called social consciousness and social reconstruction. As for the founder's self-evident truths and creator-derived unalienable rights, well, those are false biases that the schools must be protected from. And the public schools certainly have been protected from them, such that by the 1970s, the primary authority for education has been the state, increasingly hostile to parental influence. And the primary purpose of education is no longer character development, the inculcation of virtue, but to inculcate our children with primarily a secular worldview, and only secondarily to teach expertise in what we know as the 3 R's. Well, it didn't take long for the results of this change to manifest themselves. In 1983, a famous report came out called A Nation at Risk that warned of a rising tide of mediocrity that threatens our very future as a nation and a people. SAT scores started declining almost immediately from the time we started measuring them. But while success in the 3 R's were floundering, at least by one measure, Dewey's goals have been met beyond imagining. For as University of Chicago professor Alan Bloom, in his famous book, The Closing of the American Mind, could say in 1980, there is one thing a professor can be absolutely certain of. Almost every student entering the university believes or says he believes the truth is relative. Ladies and gentlemen, that was 39 years ago. What's happened since is a matter of public record. In terms of dollars per student, the U.S. outspends virtually every other nation on earth in public education. But for all our money, studies like this one from the Pew Foundation puts us in the middle to bottom rungs of academic performance compared with other nations similarly situated, most of which spend far less per student than we do. And California, unfortunately, places lower still. While our universities are able to compete, in K through 12, we rank 44 out of 50 in terms of, according to U.S. News. But even more ominous, in parallel with the declining educational standards, is the decline of parental rights, starting with Prince v. Massachusetts in 1944, where the government says now it's their job to determine what's in the best interest of the child. Or hot Brown versus Hot, Sexy, and Safer in 1995 that said that parents don't have any right to excuse their children with sexual information provided in any form the schools choose. Or more recently, out of our own Ninth Circuit, is the Fields versus Palmdale School District case, which the ACLU makes prominent use of to bludgeon school districts into submission, which held that parents have no freestanding fundamental rights to control the upbringing of their children, and that as far as sexual matters, we can present whatever we want, whenever we want. But well before 2005, California had already gotten on board the sexualization of our children train. This is just a partial list of laws that have been passed in California, starting under Gray Davis in 1999, that mirror the combination of lost parental rights and the enforcement of a value system as unrecognizable to past generations as it is dangerous. Just to highlight a few of them. In 2004, the Education Code was modified so that gender was now defined as one's perceived sex, whether or not it agrees with one's sex assigned at birth. In 2011, Senate Bill 48, called the Fairness Act, required that children must be taught to admire public figures based purely on their sexual habits and proclivities. 2 years later, AB 1266, infamously called the Bathroom Bill, required that children open up the most personal enclaves of privacy and probity to other children of the opposite sex. Which brings us finally to Assembly Bill 329. It's just the latest in a long line of cases. And you're going to learn more about this, and to tell you more about it, Pastor Tim is going to invite Pastor George Roskop. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Mark. I know you guys, after you're hearing all of this stuff, you're going to have a lot of questions, and we want to respect your time tonight. So do me a favor, hold your questions till the end, and the speakers are going to be available to talk to you afterwards. The next speaker, now that we've talked about where we've come from, and we're going to talk about where we are now, we're going to talk about the California Healthy Youth Act, AB 329, and a little bit of background on it. Pastor George Roska is our speaker, and he is the 8th of 12 children. God bless his parents. He was born in Romania under the communist regime of Nicolae Ceausescu. His family immigrated to the United States legally in his childhood. He grew up in Southern California, going from first grade through his master's degree. He is married with 4 children and pastors New Hope Church in Placentia, California. He holds a bachelor's and a master's degree and is also registered civil engineer in the state of California, practicing for over 12 years on large transportation infrastructure projects. He is passionate about protecting the freedoms granted in the Constitution that are aligned with the values of the Founding Fathers for future generations. Please welcome up Pastor George Roska.
Thank you. I will tell my parents that you guys applauded them. Oh, it's not my feat, it was theirs. We were just there to give them a very hard time. Pastor Mark gave you the context of history. What I'd like to do is I'd like to give you the context of words that are used. Because the far left is very good at redefining words. And so as you will hear these words and how they're used in law, you will be shocked because you could be reading the law and you could say, well, what's wrong with it? But we have to understand what these words mean. So to do that, I have to take you into the minds of the organizations that helped pass this law and that supported it. First one is a tweet from January of this year. And it was by SECUS. SECUS is the Sexuality, Information, and Education Council of the United States. And they say that sexual education is a vehicle for social change. And look what they mean by it. What do you think the world would look like if everyone received comprehensive sexuality education? Over onto the right. We need to prioritize educating young people about all of these concepts early on. Sex education is a golden opportunity to teach youth about dismantling systems of power and oppression that perpetuate white supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, and more. That is in sex education and not in government class. It's a little hard for me to understand. SECUS, in conjunction with Planned Parenthood in September of 2018, put out a two-page memo, and plastered right on top of the two-page memo says this: if you care about abortion rights, then you should care about sex education. Sex education, in their minds, is about leading our children to abortion and quote-unquote reproductive rights, as they will call it in the law. Thirdly, sex ed is about abolishing heteronormativity. I've never heard that word before, even though I have a master's degree. Back in 2016, in September, Gelson, which is the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, put out a tweet saying why heteronormativity is bad. And that tweet is a link to a Teen Vogue article. Now, Teen Vogue, their target audience is girls 13 to 17 years of age. And this is what the article says: it's about time we kicked heteronormativity to the curb. Never heard of the term before? It's the idea that binary gender identity and heterosexual orientation, meaning there are only two sexual orientations and genders, are the norm. These are the organizations behind AB 329, and this is their understanding of the term comprehensive sexuality education. So it's all about redefining the terms, and that's important as I'll take you on this next joyride here. What do they mean by sexuality? Because it's not sex ed anymore. It's not biology and anatomy. It's sexuality. So back in 2006, the World Health Organization defined sexuality as a central aspect of being human throughout life, encompasses sex, gender identities and roles, sexual orientation, eroticism, pleasure, intimacy, reproduction, quote-unquote, abortion, thoughts, fantasies, desires, beliefs, attitude, values, behaviors. That's not sex ed. Furthermore, that same year, Planned Parenthood put out what they call the framework for comprehensive sexuality education. And Planned Parenthood, they have a parent company, an umbrella organization worldwide that's called the International Planned Parenthood Federation. And they define sexuality to include gender, pleasure, diversity and relationships, HIV, violence, and they slipped in one more thing here: sexual rights. And that's key, because 2 years later, IPPF would put out another declaration, another document in May 2008, where they link in 10 articles of declaration that they make, they link sexual rights to human rights to civil rights. And they're saying those are one and the same. Now, why is that important? Because if you get to redefine the terms, you do not have to rewrite the laws. In America, we have something called the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And that's what today we're arguing about in the Equality Act, or the Unequal Act, or the Horrible Act, whatever you want to call it besides equality. But they are trying to make this link in order for them to redefine this so they don't have to change any law whatsoever. At the international level, there is an organization, the United Nations. They have an educational, scientific, and cultural organization committee. And in September of last year, this is the organization that's been pushing comprehensive sexuality education worldwide. It started off in Europe, pushing it over to many of the countries in Africa, and now it's made its way here in America. And this is the conclusion they drew in their report entitled International Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education. They say on page 28, it is difficult to draw strong conclusions about the impact of CSE on biological outcomes such as STIs or HIV rates, as there are still relatively few high-quality trials available, particularly those that take a longitudinal approach. That's a mouthful just to say it doesn't work, and we have no evidence that it works. And let me decipher a little bit of this for you. The outcomes. What are the outcomes that sex ed is looking for? Lower pregnancy rates and lower HIV and STD rates, okay? They're saying they have no evidence that this is doing that. And they're saying this in September of 2018. Whereas the California legislature back in 2015 said comprehensive sexuality education is the must-have for all kids in order to lower HIV and STD rates. Where did the state legislature get its evidence when the organization that's pushing this worldwide is saying 3 years later they do not have such evidence? It's mind-boggling to me that a legislature would pass this kind of a law. The next thing that these organizations like doing is they like hiding behind fancy names. So they call this the National Sexuality Education Standards. So for a person like me that is not a teacher, is not an administrator, and I look at these documents, I'm like, man, this must be coming from like the Federal Department of Education. And it's not. They like to use these words. This is not a federal document. This is developed by CECUS, by Advocates for Youth, and by another organization called ANSWER. And they are together part of an organization that they call the Future of Sex Ed. So the other thing that these organizations need is they also need really trustworthy government entities to be on their side. So they start infiltrating these organizations, the California Public Health Department, the California Department of Education, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, right? A very reputable organization. And the law, as you're going to see and we'll read through it, says that this information must be medically accurate. By whose definition? Well, they will quote CDC. So what did they do? They have infiltrated the CDC, and a couple of years ago, the CDC came out in 2016 with their own sexual health education standards. Well, guess who was the contributor and author of this? None other than the same contributor and author of the previous slide I just showed you. They were part of CECUS. So that brings us now with this understanding of what sexuality means and of what these organizations are behind. It brings us to the AB 329. Who brought it in here? Assemblymember Shirley Weber back in 2015. It was supported by California Teachers Association, California School Board Association, California Parent Teacher Association, the PTA, and you'll hear a lot more from one of our other speakers about these organizations here. Planned Parenthood, ACLU, Latinas for Reproductive Justice, Equality California. These are the organizations who have defined these terms internationally and nationally and now are pushing it. So once a law is passed by the state legislature, now the Department of Education needs to take that and interpret that law and give guidance to all of the school districts. So the Board of Education is made up of 9 members, and they have, first and foremost, in 2008, what is known as the Health Education Content Standards. That is like your foundation. After that, you have the guidance document that's called the Framework, which over the last 3 years, one of the commissions, the IQC, there's 6 commissions that make up the CDE, and this commission went out to and they spent 3.5 years to put together this health framework, and I'll be quoting some of the things that you'll see here. But back from June of 2016 all the way to May of 2019, they have been working on this. And together with Informed Parents of California, we went and we provided comments during both 60-day periods that were offered mid-year last year and at the beginning of this year. So this health framework, what is it? There is a lot of confusion about this, so I'd like to make some clarifications here, because when the health framework was approved by the CDE this month, May 8th, the framework was approved, even though there were hundreds of parents that went to protest and speak against it. The framework, first of all, is not the curriculum, okay? Let's not use those two words interchangeably. Now, each district can choose if they adopt elements from the framework. The framework is a guideline that is especially used by the publishers. So your big publishers that come in and write curriculum, and then the school districts like to just have access to that off-the-shelf curriculum so they don't have to create it on their own. So I pulled out just a couple quotes from the Department of Education's website about what they say the framework is all about. Based on current research in education and the specific content area, the framework provides a firm foundation for curriculum. The framework also guides district selection of instructional resources. So guess what the state has sent out? Oh, informed parents of California, they are uninformed. They don't know what they're talking about because this is not a curriculum. We're not forcing it upon school districts. So you're meaning to tell me that as the state, you've spent 3 years, millions of dollars for creating a document that 1,023 school districts in California do not need to use? And it's our taxpayer dollars, regardless of where you're sending your kids. You could be homeschooling your kids, private schooling your kids, charter schooling your kids, whatever you're doing with your children. Or even if you don't have children, you're a taxpayer in California. They've wasted our money, and they're using this excuse. Whereas their website says this. Well, sure enough, a week before their May 8th, vote, they sent out a clarification memo. And in this memo, they go about giving a clarification on what's the framework is all about and what the law is all about. And even they say it themselves in small writing at the bottom of the memo. They say every school district has the autonomy to choose its own curriculum as long as it meets the state guidelines. What? They're just giving us the runaround, all right? So real quick, couple of the things from the framework. Abstinence is mentioned only twice. Sex, I stopped counting after 100. TK through third grade, this is chapter 3. They're saying that gender does not always match the sexual and reproductive organs described. This is 5-year-olds to 7, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, teaching them this kind of stuff. Oh, but it's just a guideline, right? You don't have to obey it. 4th through 6th grade, they say to challenge binary concepts about gender. We're talking about 10 to 12-year-olds, an adult in the room, and if my son who's in 4th grade would raise his hand and say, oh, but my dad taught me this, they're telling the teachers in the framework to challenge my son's concept on gender being binary. 7th through 8th grade, examples for spiritual abuse include using religion to justify abuse, insisting on rigid gender roles. The state of California has now entered into becoming the Church of California to define spiritual abuse. 9th through 12th grade, they're saying that the usage of LGBTQ plus throughout this document is intended to represent an inclusive and ever-changing spectrum, meaning that gender is not binary, but it's infinite. It's infinite. There is no end to the amount of genders. And lastly, they're saying that in high school they need to teach them about rights to excuse themselves from campus to obtain confidential medical services without parental permission or notification. Yes, there is a separate ed code that allows this to happen. Your children can go and have an abortion throughout the day. They will pick them up from school, drop them right back off at 2:15. Your daughter can go right back, be picked up by the parents, and they don't have to tell you. So once the framework is set, the framework sets the guideline for the publishers. The publishers develop that curriculum. That curriculum has to be approved by ASHWAG. It's a quasi-government agency called Adolescent Sexual Health Work Group. There are 5 that have been a curriculum approved at middle school and 6 in high school, and Stephanie will give you a little bit more about that. But what I want to show you real quick before I transition to our next speaker is that AB 329 has 4 articles, and it encompasses Ed Code 51930 through 51939. And look at the words that are listed in the law. sexually transmitted infections, unintended pregnancies, gender, sexual orientation, sexuality, comprehensive, unbiased. You see, all of these code words in the law are defined not by how we understand them, but by how they understand them according to all of those documents that I mentioned. So with that, thank you very much. God bless you guys. I'll invite the next speaker up.
Thank you, Pastor George. All right, next up, we've got somebody here to speak to you about the legal issues of California Healthy Youth Act. I hate even calling it that. But Netta Higuera is an attorney with Tyler and Bursch LLP and the nonprofit organization Advocates for Faith and Freedom. Since getting her license to practice law in 2014, she has loved the ability to advocate for her clients. She is passionate about the people she serves. While at Tyler and Bursch, Netta has helped successfully vindicate a client's religious liberties in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Not an easy thing to do. She was recently featured on the cover of Focus on the Family magazine for her victory in overturning the anti-life and unconstitutional Reproductive Fact Act in California. She is dedicated to protecting religious liberty and parental rights in the courts. Please welcome up Netta Higuera.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Tim, and thank you all for being here tonight. I'm sure there are many other things you could have done with your time, but it means a lot that you are here, and it's a pleasure for me to be here. And my goal for the next 10 minutes is to help you understand parental rights in the California Healthy Youth Act and the right to opt out, because that's a big question that parents have. Can we opt out? Can we opt out all, part? Are there consequences if we opt out? And I want to preface by saying opting out is not the solution to the problem. We have to overturn the law. We have to correct the framework that you're going to hear about. But in the meantime, I want you all to know what your rights are and that you can help other parents know their rights as well. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you what the law is. I want to show you the actual language of the law. And some of these slides are going to have a lot of text on it, but I'll read the relevant parts. But, you keep hearing about context, and context is really important for everything. So to know in the context of the law where these rights are coming from and what exactly they say. There's a lot that I don't agree with the California Healthy Youth Act, but the parental rights provision is a good thing, and the right to opt out is in there. So as George mentioned, the Healthy Youth Act, which is also referred to as AB 329, is Chapter 5.6 in the Education Code. So those are all synonymous. So when we're talking about the Healthy Youth Act, it's Chapter 5.6, and it's divided into the 4 articles. I'm first going to walk you through Article 4, which is notice and parental excuse. And Article 4 has 3 sections that we'll briefly cover. And if you have questions after, I'm going to be at the table. You can get my card and ask me later, because it is a lot to digest, but bear with me. So the first code section, Ed Code 51937, it states that it is the intent of the legislator to encourage pupils to communicate with their parents or guardians about human sexuality and HIV, and, listen to this, to respect the rights of parents or guardians to supervise their children's education on these subjects. The legislator intends to create a streamlined process to make it easier for parents and guardians to review materials. And then the underlined part, if they wish to excuse their children from participation in all or part of that instruction or evaluation. And one thing I want to make clear is this is just in the context of sex ed. It's not, with assemblies, with history class, language arts, where this context is brought up. Pursuant to SB 48, but we're just talking about your rights in sex ed class. And the last thing that's underlined, parents and guardians have the ultimate responsibility for imparting values regarding human sexuality to their children. So if that wasn't clear enough, the next section reiterates that a parent or guardian has the right to excuse their child from all or part of comprehensive sexual health education. Now, the way that you would excuse is that you have to affirmatively, in writing, submit an opt-out form, which there are tons of examples online. The Informed Parents of California website has opt-outs that you just fill in your child's information and submit it to the school. There's no permission slips that are required, so your children don't have to get your permission in order to sit through some of this, but you do have to actively opt out. So some people say that there is an exception to this, that you can't opt out in sex ed when it comes to gender and sexual orientation. And they use this section, Ed Code 51932. Remember the last two slides, there were no exceptions. It was clear as day, all or part. So that's what you're going to arm yourself with. This code section 51932 has a part A and part B, and it says this chapter, chapter 5.6, which is the entire California Health and Youth Act, does not apply to description or illustration of human reproductive organs that may appear in textbooks. So for example, an anatomy textbook, that's not subject to California Health and Youth Act. You don't need to have the right to opt out or notice. And the next part is B. This chapter doesn't apply to instruction that discusses gender, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation outside the context of sex ed. So say in a assembly, you don't have that right to opt out. Not that you can't, nowhere on this slide will you see the words that you can't. It's merely irrelevant to those other courses. The California Health and Youth Act just applies to sex ed. And so don't let people tell you, oh, well, you can't opt out. This prevents you from doing that. You know, for a quick analogy, if I have two kids, Jack and Jill, and I give Jack permission to say go to his friend's house, but I don't say anything about Jill, that's not me saying Jill can't go, you know, or that she doesn't have, I'm not giving her permission. It's just irrelevant. I'm giving the affirmative permission. So you have affirmative permission to opt out and notice in sex ed, but it's irrelevant to other courses. And that means basically that a school district can grant you that right if they wanted to. You're not prevented from having that right if a school district in their local control wanted to do that. All right, so you'll see this is section 51932. If you look at the entire act, it's not in Article 4 where it talks about opt-out and parental rights. It's actually in Article 1, just generally saying, hey, you know, don't be confused. We're not talking about textbooks that have, you know, illustrations of anatomy or when it talks about gender in other courses. All right, so I'm glad I got that cleared up because that's a huge question that I constantly see parents being asked. The next code section is about notice, so 51938. The California Health and Youth Act states that at the beginning of each school year, basically that each school shall notify the parent about instruction and comprehensive sexual health education. And the statute actually gives what is required. So when you hear shall, it means it's not in the discretion of the school. They must do that. So they have to give you notice, and the notice shall do all of the following. It has to advise in writing that the curriculum being used is available for inspection, the videos, everything. It has to advise parents or guardian whether the sex ed is being presented by a school district official, the teacher, or whether they're having outside consultants from some of these other organizations. That has to be in the notice. It has to include information that the parents can request a copy of the law. And finally, that the parent has a right to excuse their child from participation in sex ed. So if any of you have kids that you've gotten this notice and it doesn't include what's required, then that's a problem, and you need to raise that either yourself. I want to arm you all so that you don't think, oh, I need to go find a lawyer. I'm definitely available, but you know, these things you can show your district yourself and say, it's clear as day, it's black and white, this is what's required to be in the notice, and you didn't put that in your notice, and so you can, you know, we've seen sometimes they didn't give us far enough in advance notice, and so it delays it, or it can just help us to help parents know their rights and to make a difference in the school so that they can't just present this material without giving parents that advance notice and the right to review. All right, so the next thing is surveys. So a lot of schools are giving kids what's called Healthy Kids surveys, and in these surveys they're asking questions about sexual activity, risk behavior, mental health, emotional health. The California Health and Youth Act requires that schools give the right to parents to opt out. Again, it's not a permission slip, but you have to affirmatively exercise that right. And you also have to be given notice when the survey is happening, and you have to be given the option to review it if you want. And another education code in the Healthy Youth Act, 51934. It states that basically school districts have the discretion earlier than 7th grade to have sex ed. So it's required at least once in middle school, once in high school, but it's up to the local school districts whether they want to teach this to lower than 7th grade. So it brings me to my next slide. What can school districts do? And as voters, as parents, as taxpayers, we influence our school board members. They're elected officials. And so we can go to school board meetings. We can ask them during election time what their stance is on particular things. So school districts can enact board policies. They can actually enact a formal policy saying we elect not to have sex ed lower than 7th grade in our discretion. Or they could say 6th grade or 5th grade, whatever appropriate based on that particular community. They can give parents the right to notice and opt out in other courses, to just be more transparent and say, well, we're teaching this in history, we have to teach it, but here's what it is, and you can talk to your kids beforehand. And we have model policies that we can give to school boards. We offer to defend those policies pro bono and to advise them. They can adopt a conservative curriculum. You heard George say that, a lot of districts aren't going to choose to do this, but they can. It's in their discretion, and with parental pressure, they can do that. And with that, I'm out of time, but I know that was a lot. Thank you for your attention, and I will be at the middle table if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Netta. All right, so next up we have what I believe to be the most difficult portion of our night, and that is to explain to you what's actually in some of these books. And to share this with you, we have somebody very special, Stephanie Yates. Stephanie Yates is a wife and a mother of 3 children, one in public school system, and the founder of Informed Parents of California. What began in April of 2018 as a simple Facebook user group has now grown to include over 27,000 parents in California, across the state. Stephanie has become a subject expert on the content of the state's California Healthy Youth Act approved curriculum and has shared it with thousands of concerned parents across the state. She equips parents to engage at local school boards to fight for parental rights and the protection of their kids. Please welcome up Stephanie Yates.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. So for my presentation, I'm going to give you a warning ahead of time. The content that I'm going to show you is very explicit, but we feel obligated to share it with you because this is the stuff that your children are going to be seeing or your grandchildren are going to be seeing in class. And everything that's blacked out will not be blacked out for them. Now, I don't know if you're sitting next to your spouse or next to a complete stranger of the opposite sex, but I want you to keep that in mind if you are, because when our children are in class together, they don't separate our kids anymore. They keep them together, and boys and girls are going to be sitting next to each other while they're going over this content. So, comprehensive sexuality education is taught to children with no parental consent required. Well, they're supposed to, like Nita said, they're supposed to notify us, but they don't have to have our permission. So if we don't get the notice and we don't opt out, they're going to give this information to our children. So I'm going to show you what a notice looks like. This is a notice that was sent home to a school district in Orange County. And we know that there's similar notices being sent out across California. And this one says, this letter is to inform you that the Family Life Sex Education Unit will begin on X date and parent notification is required for this program. The videos will be shown that cover human anatomy, human reproduction, and sexually transmitted diseases including HIV and AIDS. Please check the following box, sign the bottom of this paper, and have your students return it to the health class for our records. The box, I understand that my child will be starting the unit of human reproductive and sexually transmitted diseases, including HIV and AIDS. Now tell me, was this a permission slip where you're giving your child permission? Yes? No. This is an FYI. It's notification letting you know that they're going to have the class. But you checking the box means nothing. So if you get that notice and you're a busy parent and you say, oh, I don't want my kid taking this, so I'm not even going to send this back, your child's getting it. If you check the box thinking you're giving permission or whatever, your child's going to get it. So you actually have to send an opt-out form stating that you don't want your child to have this. So comprehensive sexuality education, so that notice for the sex ed, we're going to call it CSE, comprehensive sexuality education. It's a mouthful right there. So we're going to call it CSE. That notice does not tell you that they're normalizing anal and oral sex to your children, does it? No. They're not telling you that they have an obsessive focus on sexual pleasure. They're not telling you that they're promoting and encouraging exploration and experimentation on gender identity and sexual orientation. And they're not telling you that they're going to teach your children how to give and receive consent. What are we talking about when we say give and receive consent? In AB 329, the law states negotiation skills is the word that they use. So let's put that into context. That's negotiation skills for child sex. It's illegal for children to have sex. Children legally cannot consent to sex, but they're going to teach our children how to give and receive consent for sex. Why is that? If they teach children as young as TK how to give consent for sex, they can lower the consent laws or eliminate them altogether. It's not telling us, that notice is not telling us that they are exposing our children to visual and written pornography. So tell me, is that notice a full disclosure, transparency of what your child's really learning in these curriculums? No. So I'm going to show you some pictures from the framework, actual pages from framework, and pages from actual curriculum. The framework and the curriculum are two different things. So this is a page in chapter 1 of the framework, and that chapter 1 is introduction, so it covers TK through 12th grade. TK, for people that don't know, some people don't know, that's transitional kindergarten, so that's even lower, that's 4 years old. So the goal of the California Department of Ed is for our children to explore and discover their gender identity and sexuality starting in transitional kindergarten, all the way into and beyond their high school years. The way they plan on doing this is to be introducing CSE in TK through 12th grade. In elementary, they will introduce gender identity and sexual orientation. By the time they get to 5th grade, they start introducing sexual activities and head full force into junior high and high school. One of the things that they use in the elementary school in the very young grades is the genderbread person. Has anybody seen the genderbread person or heard of the genderbread person before? Yes. This is happening in our schools. I'm going to show you a video of the creator of the genderbread person.
Let's unpack this whole gender conversation. You use a device or a character called the genderbread man.
Person.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. The genderbread person.
It's okay. I found it really helpful to think about gender in a few different distinct categories. Gender identity, how you define your gender and how you see yourself. Gender expression, the different ways that we present or perform gender through our actions, our dress, and our demeanor. And biological sex or anatomical sex, the physical characteristics that make up our body that in many people's minds equal gender.
So gender expression is the way you present yourself to the world. So you could be talking about the way you dress,
Yeah.
The way you comb your hair, or use product.
Yeah.
So everything kind of as it relates to the outside world.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's a perfect way to think about it. So even just, okay, so this is funny. The way that I'm sitting right now is a very feminine expression of sitting, because like how we sit is gendered, right?
Meanwhile, I'm kind of man-spreading.
Yeah, you're man-spreading. You're not even giving me enough room to properly man-spread over here. This is the man cross, the masculine way of crossing the leg. This is just uncomfortable for me. Feels like so much.
It feels good to me.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's like yoga. Okay, now let's do the girl.
Okay.
So gender is different than sexual orientation,
Yeah.
but a lot of people get them confused.
Yeah. Gender is who you go to bed as. Sexual orientation is who you go to bed with. So
Got
if
it.
you haven't heard that one's important.
So let's talk about penises and vaginas, shall we? Let's just go right
If you
there.
haven't already talked about penises and vaginas, we need to talk about penises and vaginas, because that's what everybody always thinks. Like immediately, as soon as you say gender, anybody who's walking by right now who's hearing us say the word gender, the first thing that's popping into their mind is external genitalia. They're thinking about penises and vaginas.
So, for the purpose of our discussion, the bottom line is your external genitalia does not dictate your gender.
Yeah.
Wait a second, can you rewind that? The bottom line is your external genitalia does not dictate your gender.
Yeah. I mean, that I couldn't have said it better.
So that's what our children are going to see and learn. That's going to confuse our kids. So I'm going to go over some framework chapters. In chapter 3, it's talking about TK through 3rd grade. I'm going to show you books that they're recommending in TK through 3rd grade. Now, because we've been doing these conferences and showing these books across California all over the internet, the California Department of Ed, when they passed the framework, voted on it, they said that they are going to remove these books, right? But they're still going to keep them as resources for teachers. So what does that really mean? They're going to delete words off of a page, but they're still going to make these books available for teachers, so they're still using the books. This is a book called Who Are You? And as you can see on the whiteboard, it says, am I a girl, a boy, both, neither, or just me? Down further on the page, it says there are just a few words people use: trans, gender queer, non-binary, gender fluid, transgender, gender neutral, age gender, new choice, bi-gender, third gender, two-spirit. Are you confused? Because I'm sure our kids are going to be confused with that, right? That's kindergarten. Babies can't talk, so grown-ups make a guess by looking at their bodies. This book, remember, it's Who Are You? So they're really starting to confuse our kids at a very young age. This next book in the framework is called My Princess Boy. I'm going to read you one page, just one page out of this book. I love my princess boy. When we go shopping, he is the happiest when looking at girls' clothes. But when he says he wants to buy a pink bag or a sparkly dress, people stare at him. And when he buys girls things, they laugh at him and they laugh at me. And it hurts us both. Remember, this is being taught 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds. So they're confusing our children, and then they're emotionally manipulating our children. Now tell me, does your child want to hurt anybody? No. So when they're talking about these, if a boy buys girl things, that's going to hurt them if you question it. Our kids don't want to do that. Okay, so these are the books that are getting a little bit more graphic, and it's going to show different body parts. This one goes over the vulva and the vagina and the different body parts and the penis and the scrotum. This one goes into more detail. So they have that little girl crouching down with her legs spread so they can really show a visual of down there. This is child pornography that they're showing our children. Oops. More pictures. This one is actually of a penis inside a vagina. And you know what? I've gone over this stuff many of times, but it wasn't until last night I was looking at that book where it says, can I read it? It's, It gives a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, here we come. I didn't notice that before. I have a lot of stuff that I've been looking at. Okay, so this book, we're heading in chapter 4. That's 4th through 6th grade, so that's 9-year-olds to 11-year-old kids. These two books are pretty much the same stuff inside with some variations. But inside these books, they have a lesson for the teachers. So the teachers are supposed to give the children, and it says for 10-year-olds, give them a picture of a penis and scrotum, and they're supposed to color it in, and she's supposed to tell them with her best kindergartner voice to color the shaft blue and white stripes. And as the children are doing that, she has them yell out slang words, as you can see, and writes them on the blackboard so that they can get it out and get comfortable. But she keeps them busy coloring to get them focused on that. And then she gives them the picture of the vagina, the gynecological view of a vagina, and has them do the same thing. In this book, it also teaches our children how to masturbate. It tells our girls about the G-spot and how to stretch out their own hymen with KY jelly and their fingers. And it may take days or weeks for them to do it. It shows lots of penises, erect, not erect, circumcised, not circumcised, lots of vaginas, the hymen, different pictures of the hymen, so you can get an idea that everybody's hymen is different, vulva, everything. It goes into very explicit. This is child pornography and adult pornography. This book right here, sex, puberty, and all that stuff, this book we weren't talking about, we weren't exposing. So this is one of the books that they're going to keep in that they didn't mention, right? Because they're only taking out books that are a distraction, but they're not bad, but they're a distraction, so they're taking them out. This book, as you can see, it has a boy measuring his penis. It goes into detail how you can give yourself an erection and come. It goes into detail of how to fondle each other. So they're teaching our children in 4th, 5th grade how to have good sex and how to pleasure each other. Chapter 4, it says students can learn more about puberty using age-appropriate, creative, and interactive online resources such as PBS's online videos and on puberty and transitioning. Do you know what they're talking about transitioning? That's gender transitioning. On one of the district websites, I found a whole gender transition plan and going into detail how they're going to hide it from the parents. And what would happen if a teacher actually told a parent? I mean, in detail. Here's another one in chapter 2. It says teachers should normalize sexual feelings. If the topic of masturbation arises, teachers may explain masturbation as not physically harmful. This is also an important time to discuss gender, gender roles, and gender expression. Any chance they get, they're going to introduce the different genders and sexual orientations. Now, this page in the framework was updated. It says when the topic arises. Now, because Planned Parenthood put in public comment, and their public comment said that they wanted it when it's introduced and arises. So that means our teachers will be introducing it, not just when it arises. So they take Planned Parent's public comment, but they won't take our public comment. In this one, it says, instructions on sexual health must affirm diverse sexual orientation and include examples, must also include gender, gender expression, gender identity, and the harmful outcomes that may occur from negative gender stereotypes. What is a negative gender stereotype? I know George kind of covered it. I'll say it again. I believe that a biological boy is a boy and a biological girl is a girl. I know it is. But they're going to teach my child that I have a harmful, negative stereotype. They're putting the the kids against the parents. If you go through this health curriculum, it's almost about a 1,000-page document. Over and over, you'll see the words challenge, challenge, challenge. They're supposed to challenge the children, and the children are supposed to learn to challenge the parents. Are we supposed to be teaching our children to challenge us? No. This is 7th through 8th grade. Students may be non-monogamous, and the terms partners may also be used to be more inclusive. Promiscuity, we're promoting that. Multiple partners. It's supposed to be about health education and how to protect them from pregnancy, HIV, AIDS, and STIs. Why do we call it STIs? Because that's just an infection like a cold you can get rid of really quick versus a disease that could take your life. Some of these diseases like the gonorrhea and syphilis, they don't talk about how when it goes up into the woman's fallopian tubes, how it creates scar tissue and you get atopical pregnancies or you have infertility problems. But they don't go into that because it's just an infection. You don't have to worry about that. What's happening in the curriculum in the junior high and high school? So like we said, it's mandatory once in junior high, once in high school, right? If a school district just chooses to teach it at any other grade, K through 12, they can. This is a page out of Teen Talk. It's going over the different birth control methods. One of them, it refers to birth control pill, the patch, and vaginal ring as scrambled eggs. Do you get it? Women have eggs. And you're going to scramble those eggs up, those babies. They think it's funny, don't they? Make it fun for the kids. Another page out of Teen Talk, it talks about the different sexual acts. It talks about oral and anal sex and vaginal sex. This is explicit detail. It says anal sex, putting your penis inside of someone's anus or having someone put their penis inside of your anus. Is that what they're telling you at school that they're going to teach? Or you don't have to worry about the misinformation you're learning, even though you get to see this. These are pages out of the curriculum. This is Positive Prevention Plus, teaching about the different sexual contacts. Once again, oral, vaginal, and anal sex. So it doesn't matter which curriculum your school district chooses. They're all going to teach the same content. It's just going to look different. One has more text, one has more visuals. Now, what they're not telling you for this sexual health class to prevent HIV and AIDS and STDs is that there's no FDA approved condoms for anal sex because it's the most highest risk behavior. The statistics are if you have 100% perfect use with a condom in adults, not kids, in adults, and adults don't even do it 100% of the time, you'll only have a 70% efficacy rate. But it drops down dramatically, especially in kids. So say we have 100 kids, 30 of those kids will probably get HIV. It's only a matter of time. Is that a gamble that you're wanting to take with your children? 30 out of a class of 100? No. I say this sarcastically. Rights, Respect, Responsible is my favorite curriculum because they have the audacity, but then it shows to where their mindset is. At the top here, it says a curriculum K through 12. This page is talking about a different barrier method, which is a dental dam. And you use a dental dam for oral sex on a vulva or an anus. They're teaching our children how to put their mouth on somebody's anus. We teach our children how to wash their hands after they use the restroom so they don't spread germs and disease. And at school, we're sending them to teach them how to put their mouth on somebody's anus for sexual pleasure. Don't worry, the dental dams are flavored so it protects you more. This is a Be Real, Be Ready curriculum. Planned Parenthood in San Francisco, they wrote this curriculum, but it's being used all over California. This is a page, and it says on this page, sorry, let me go to that quick because I can't see it. fun fact. See the fun fact? Since the anus is not a part of the reproductive system, if someone chose to have anal sex without a condom, pregnancy would not be possible. That is a fun fact. They're not talking about the dangers that come with that type of behavior. They're not talking about the lifelong damage of people's anuses coming out of their body and having to have bags to go to poop. But it's a fun fact, don't worry. So, chapter 6 out of the framework, 9th through 12th grade. So I'm going to tell you about a book. It's promote a school-wide read featuring the book Sex, All You Need to Know, Sexuality Guide to Get You Through Your Teens and 20s. So let's see what they think our teens need to get them through their teens and 20s. So here, skip through that. So this is the book. I'm sure many of you have seen the cover of it. So one of the things that our teens need to know to get them through their teens and 20s is deeper manual sex. That's fisting. They actually go into detail. So I've heard about fisting because I've been in this battle for a little while, so I've heard about it, and I cannot wrap my mind around how you can put your fist inside somebody's anus or vagina. But they go into detail on how many fingers to insert at a time until you get the whole entire fist in there. And then once it's in there, you open it up and move it around. Do you know how dangerous that is? If there's a puncture in the anus and the feces gets into the body, fecal matter, that can cause toxicity and it will kill them. But it's all about health. They need to know it because they're asking about this information anyway, and they're going to do it anyway. I don't know about you, but I was not doing any of this stuff. I didn't even hear about this stuff until the last few years. One of the things about the AB 329, we're supposed to teach about HIV and AIDS prevention, STD prevention, body fluid and blood play. What is it and how do you do it? So it talks about urine, semen, menses, which is menstrual periods, blood, how people like to taste, smell, feel it for sexual pleasure. Tell me, is that about sexual health? Or are they putting this is child endangerment. Is this what we want for our children? Our children deserve to be protected and safe in schools, and we're sending them to an indoctrination center. A government facility is what these schools are. For them to tell them, confuse them, to emotionally manipulate them, to put them against us. How many of you parents are dealing with your kids rebelling against you and you're trying to figure out where that's coming from? It's coming from the schools. They're putting them into danger and they're saying, we're your friends. You come talk to us because your parents don't know what they're talking about. Not like we didn't go through puberty, right? So here's one last video.
Being a teen is tough. You are not. It's harder to not know the girl. Or a job, or pretty much anything that anyone else considers weird. And puberty? So imagine knowing you're a boy when everyone else tells you that you're a girl. Or knowing you're neither. Or a bit of 90% of trans students were harassed because of their sexual orientation or expression in school. A third of them
This is what they're showing in 7th grade. When do our kids get confused the most with who they are, right? About 7th grade, junior high, trying to find themselves. And this is the stuff that they're showing them. I don't know about you, but this stuff makes me really, really mad. It made me so mad that I started a group, Informed Parents of California. And right here, I see an army of parents, army of grandparents, and we need every single one of you. You need to tell everybody that you know, whether they laugh at you or not. I used to be a people pleaser. I didn't want anybody to be mad at me. And I finally got to the point where I said, I don't care what they think, what is happening with our children. I'm going to speak up. I am going to share it, and I will not stop. If you start sharing this and they start saying stuff to you, don't worry, because those ones are really loud, but it's what happens on the background. So sometimes I'll share these in our city groups, right? And we get all kinds of crazy people attacking me. And one time somebody said, I bet that wasn't the response you were expecting. And I said, it's exactly what I expected, because it's what's going on behind the scenes. The quiet ones that know not to engage with you and not to say anything are coming to our group, and our group starts spiking. So don't worry about the ones that get nasty. Just ignore them. It shows where they're at. But you continue to talk to the people. Don't worry about the laughing faces or whatever they say. You're Mama and Papa Bears, and we need every single one of you. And so we ask you to join us at Informed Parents of California, and we will help you get organized. We'll help you get informed, equipped, and activated in your county and in your school district to fight this. And we need to fight it at the local level and at the state level. And we need to all join together and rise up, because our army is getting bigger and bigger and bigger by the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Great job. We want to continue on with the great speakers tonight. We want to bring to you an educational professional's perspective. And to do that, I want to invite up Brenda Lebsack. Brenda Lebsack has been a public school teacher since 1990. She has taught 4th grade, kindergarten, junior high, and high school English, special education K through 12, and is now an adapted PE teacher in the Santa Ana Unified School District. She was elected as a board member for the Orange Unified School District in 2016. She and her husband, Mark Lebsack, have been married 33 years and have 2 adult children. Please welcome up Brenda Lebsack.
Thank you so much. And I know this is difficult information to hear. And as you're going to know, I mean, we all have school districts, and yes, there is local control. How many of you are public school teachers here? Okay, good. Raise it high. How many of you know a public school teacher? Good, I thought all of you do. So I want you to pass this information to them. And what I'd like you to do is, I don't know if on the brochures it has my name, but Brenda Lebsack, you can Google that and you'll get more information. There's some articles I've written that actually, some things I'm going to talk about here, you're going to see primary documents, because I feel like as I want to share information, especially to teachers and inform them, teachers want evidence, and that's what I'm giving, evidence, okay? So where this comes from now, even though, yes, you're going to have to talk to teachers, they're going to say, what? That kind of stuff isn't happening in my school. That's crazy. You're misinformed. Here's the deal. This is a framework. She's telling you things that are in the framework. It's in there, okay? And you can read it for yourself. You can read the books for yourself. And what my question is it may not be showing up in all the schools. It is, the junior high and high school, it is showing up, because some of those videos you saw, that was from Teen Talk. The trans video that says gender can be non-binary, it can be you're both genders, neither gender, gender fluid, gender queer, all these different genders. That's in the 7th grade Teen Talk, which is highest recommended by the state of California. And I know that because my district was looking at it, and I'm like, what in the world? What are we doing here? So I want to get to you and talk about a union. So some of you might be, how many of you are part of a union? Maybe firemen or policemen, different unions. Well, the teachers union, of course, helps us get higher raises, better benefits, better retirements. So the teachers are very loyal to their union. And I understand that. They protect us in many ways. However, they're also very, very political. We have 350,000 teachers in the state of California. That includes professors that pay money in, and they are the lobbyists that help pass these laws. They're the ones that helped pass these laws that the California Healthy Youth Act. AB 329, the ones that are highlighted in yellow, says the ones that were lobbied by the California Teachers Association. And if you're thinking teachers, yes, teachers are for parent rights. However, this law took away parent rights, as you saw. Gender identity, sexual orientation, it says parents don't have to be notified, and there's no opt-out, K through 12. So when she showed you that one book, Who Are You?, that falls under this category for kindergartners. The many genders being taught, no parent notification, no opt-out. Okay, and when we talk about parent rights, if you go to this one website, and again, Google my name, all the documents are there, under even my comments under the article. But CaliforniaSafeSchools.org, which is on the steering committee, is the ACLU and the California Teachers Association. And they have a question to answer about AB 329. One of the questions is this: do parents have a constitutional right to prevent their children from receiving education in public schools on subjects they disapprove? And the answer? Almost never. Parents do not have veto power over the content of public school instruction. If parents choose to place their children in public schools, parental rights are generally outweighed by the state's interests in educating students. If they elect to send their children to public schools, parents have very limited rights to prevent their children from receiving the entire range of instruction available in public schools. That's alarming to me. And I will tell you, most public school teachers, I don't think, believe this. But yet our union is on the steering committee and helped write this document. Do parents have the right to notice about and to opt children out of diversity education programs that include discussions of sexual orientation and other controversial topics? The answer? No. Instruction or materials that discuss gender, sexual orientation, or family life and do not discuss human reproductive organs and their functions is not subject to the parental notice and opt-out laws, according to Ed Code 51932B. You can Google this website and read it for yourself and share it with other people. I bring up the ACLU because when our district stopped Teen Talk, because I was showing our community what was in it, and I said, please, come to my board meeting and read the quotes out of the curriculum directly. So you read the pansexuality quotes, read the anal sex quotes, read the oral sex on anus quotes. Shock the board because they haven't read the curriculum. They don't even know what's in it. All right? We have to know, we have to do the research. Parents, we have to do it. Don't just think I elected my board member, he or she will do it for me. You got to help out your board members. I couldn't have stopped it without the parents showing up to those board meetings, okay? ACLU sent us a letter, and this is what they said. And actually, Mark already said it. In the letter, it says, parents do not have the right to dictate what curriculum is used or what information is provided. In other words, how dare The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit has ruled that parents do not have any constitutional right to prevent a public school from providing its students with whatever information it wishes to provide, sexual or otherwise, when and as the school determines that it is appropriate to do so. ACLU is basically trying to threaten school districts, and this is why school districts are paranoid to get this stuff into the schools. They are paranoid about being sued by the ACLU because they're coming down like a hammer with threats. And this is what the ACLU always says. And by the way, parents, don't you know that 89% of parents in the state of California approve of comprehensive sex education in the context of AB 329? They say it over and over again. So I looked at their footnote and it said UC Berkeley. I said, you know what? I'm going to contact that professor. I did. I contacted Dr. Norman Constantine and I said, would you please send me the survey? He sent it to me, 24 pages. Do you know that in that survey from 2007, there was not one question about gender identity? Not one question about pansexuality, asexuality, anal sex, oral sex on anus, genderqueer umbrella, all the stuff that they are saying is the best and the highest recommended by the state. None of that content was even in the survey. People, we're being misrepresented. It's a big lie. Okay, CTA endorsed Senate Bill 677, data collection on sexual orientation and gender orientation required in the California Healthy Kids Survey and the teacher credential applications. And they also endorsed CHEW. Now, please, look at these surveys that your kids are getting. They're very, very invasive. They ask them about all kinds of things. They're very leading because they're using these stats to create legislation. So I would ask you to please go to your schools and say, what surveys are my kids getting? It's called the Healthy Kids, what's it called? Healthy Kids Survey? Something like that. Check it out. Now, my district isn't actually using that survey. We're using a different one that's much more conservative. Senate Bill 1146. This bill did not pass. However, CTA did endorse Ricardo Lara, and this bill almost shut down our faith-based colleges. It was going to remove the Cal Grants for students who go to faith-based colleges. It said that they're going to take out chapels. No more chapels, no more teaching of scriptures in any classes except vocational ministry classes. That would have devastated faith-based colleges because they said the scriptures are teaching discriminatory teachings, so they shouldn't be getting any state funding. That bill did not pass, thank God, but Laura, the CTA endorsed Laura, and he has now been climbing the political ladder and is now our California Insurance Commissioner right underneath our governor. The CTA endorsed this law, Senate Bill 239, to intentionally infect someone with HIV virus is no longer a felony. What does that have to do with education? Well, now that I read, I'm kind of figuring it out and I'm connecting the dots. If you don't believe me, well, here was a quote from Rick Sabur about Senate Bill 239. It says, "It's not only fair, but it's good public health, and it will be good for all Californians." This is a screenshot off of CTA.org, in case you don't believe me, and you can always call CTA.org, talk to Tony, because they've already archived it because it's an older legislative bill, but you can find out on their website the ones that they have endorsed. They endorsed AB 1266, which is the use of facilities based on perceived gender rather than biological gender. They also endorsed Amiano. They endorsed Senate Bill 179. This is a big one. We now, as of January 1st, 2019, have an official third gender called non-binary. Folks, non-binary does not mean transgender. Non-binary means unlimited genders. It means you can be both genders. You can be neither gender. You can be gender fluid or anything in between, okay? Now think about this. Every school has a non-discrimination policy, which means that you cannot discriminate based on age, sex, disabled, and all the categories. Well, gender identity and sexual orientation is one of those categories. Have we ever in our history had a protected category that has an unlimited definition? This is scary, folks. That means in the framework, they also talked about teachers need to use gender-neutral pronouns in order to be more inclusive, such as they, them, and theirs. That means that if a teacher refuses to use a plural pronoun for a singular student who says they're both genders, their job would be in jeopardy. Their job would be in jeopardy if they did not use the proper pronouns that a student identifies with. Now, I first learned about the gender spectrum in a CTA magazine, March 2017. And you can look this up online as well. In it, it talked about, this is what the gender categories were. First of all, gender nonconforming, which means transgender. Second, ambigender, which means you can be both genders and use the pronouns they, them, or theirs. Third, agender, which means you're neither male nor female, and you use the pronouns ze, here, hears, or hereself. Or you're gender fluid, which means one week you might be a girl, next week you might be a boy. So you have to fluctuate the pronouns. As a teacher, this could get very confusing. I would forget. Fifth one is questioning, because now we've really confused these kids and they don't know who they are or what they are. Pronouns. This is not one that CTA endorsed. However, Senate Bill 219 says that health workers, this is a law in our state, health workers can be jailed or given a $1,000 fine if they do not use correct pronouns for trans patients in long-term care facilities. Let me tell you what the tactic is. They take bills, they set a precedent, usually with either the elderly that are in long-term care facilities that nobody's going to advocate for, or with foster youth, because they don't have a lot of people advocating for foster youth. Okay, so they've already passed a law that, and I didn't put that one up here, that says for foster youth, they can, if they identify as a different gender, they can, at the age of 12, start hormone therapy with tax money dollars being paid for it without any parental consent. That is already a law. Okay, that passed in September 2018. These are stepping stones. The next one, it won't be the elderly in long-term care facilities. It'll be anybody. I started learning about this as a teacher. I'm part of the union. I prayed and I felt the Lord showed me to start getting involved in my union. So I went online and said, oh, first thing, go to a conference. First conference that popped up was the LGBT conference. I didn't even know they had LGBT conferences. I learned that my union has many conferences and most of them have nothing to do with academics. They have to do with human rights, social justice, LGBT. It's a very big social agenda to shift our culture. When I was at this conference and I heard Eric Hines, our CTA president, speak in 2015, yes, December. I was new to everything, and he said, talked about a court case, Friedrichs versus CTA. Are you familiar with that court case? Supreme Court, okay. Which basically, the purpose was to give teachers a choice of whether to be a union member or not, rather than to mandate it. And he called the plaintiffs of the court case a spawn of Satan. I was in shock, so I'm part of the Teachers Christians Association as well, so I called the president when I went back to my hotel room, and I'm like, can you please tell me about this court case? Like, who's the plaintiff? And he told me about her, and he said, she's part of our organization, and we are actually plaintiffs as well, as an organization. I'm like, wow, I was just called a spawn of Satan. I heard him say it again, and the second time I actually recorded it on my phone. I will use it someday. I will use it. Because I find it very hypocritical in that they're saying you're haters, you're bigots, when, like, really, I wasn't feeling a lot of love, to be honest. Here's another one I went to, Equity Human Rights Conference. At this one, a CTA lobbyist, I asked him, I used to teach in Las Vegas, high school, and I said, hey, I was in a Mormon community, but yet I had LGBT kids, and I said, so this situation came up, one of my Mormon students said, I believe marriage is between a man and a woman. I said, I had LGBT kids in my class. I said, how do you think I should have dealt with that situation to respect the diversity of my students? And he said to me, treat that student as though he said, black people should be burned at the stake. That is word for word what he said to me. I was in shock. I was in shock. I'm like, okay, I can't take this. I have to invite some friends to come with me to the next conference because they're not going to believe what I'm hearing. So I did. I invited a former superintendent and I invited another teacher. One was Catholic, another one was another religion. And I asked this question to the LGBT caucus president, and I said, this is what a CTA lobbyist said to me. Do you think that's true? Like, do you believe that too? He said, yeah, absolutely. No hesitation. Let me just get this to you, that there is a belief, and they may not say it in public, but when you're speaking to the choir, which I was in the choir at that time, basically like anybody who doesn't align with our beliefs are like the KKK. I know it's hard, it's hard to believe, but it's insane. Senate Bill 48. They endorsed this, to include the role and the contributions of the LGBT individuals in history books. They also support Lino. So I encourage teachers to also be part of the Christian Educators Association. It is $200 a year, well worth it. $2 million of liability insurance. I'm so glad I have it. I've used it. I've called the lawyers. They'll pray with me over the phone. They give me good advice. Because especially since now I'm getting very much more open about talking about the CTA, I figure I better have this liability insurance. I'm going to I don't know how much time I have, but I want to say that for educators, please, you need to be part of it, because if we don't get ourselves educated here on what's going on, then we actually become part of the problem. We are enabling this whole agenda, okay? We are the insiders, we are the credible voices, but you need to find out what's going on. One way is to go to anything having to do with inclusive or welcoming or safe schools. Those are the buzzwords. Those are the cover-ups, okay? Welcoming, safe, inclusive, respect, even. Social emotional learning, you're gonna find a lot in there. Suicide prevention curriculum, there's a lot in there. Go to those professional development. Anti-bullying, school climate. Textbook and review committees. Participate in the sex ed curriculum review committee. Library book adoptions, book fairs, and the surveys to students. I just want to tell you one thing. So the Human Rights Campaign is the one that supports welcomingschools.org. I would encourage you to Google welcomingschools.org. Tony Thurmond, our superintendent of the state, has a bill on the table right now. This bill was vetoed with Brown, because he said it was an overkill. It was an overkill, but it's gonna get passed with Newsom. So the bill basically says that all teachers in the state of California will be mandated to be trained on how to create inclusive classrooms so that our schools will become more safe. It sounds beautiful, doesn't it? It sounds beautiful. But let me tell you what's in the Human Rights Campaign for Welcoming Schools. Here's this is the way we're supposed to create more inclusive classrooms. It's the red, a crayon story. The crayon is red, but actually is blue inside. They, she, he, me. Okay, I just have to read one page from this so you get the idea. This is for pre-K through first grade. This says, someone who looks at me may think I am a girl. No, wait. You can change pronouns from he to she or from she to he. You can use new ones like Z, or create your own, like tree. Some people use they. That's the perfect way. There are many more pronouns waiting to be discovered and used. Kids are innately imaginative. And if they're being told that they can be any gender they want and create that gender, that's mayhem in a child's mind. This is a parable about unlimited genders, non-binary, and here's what it says. Neither. This is for pre-K through first grade. Once upon a time, there were two kinds, this and that. But now, there are many kinds, this, that, sort of, just, somewhat, whatnot, rather, a little, either, very, neither, and both. And all are welcome. All right, I'm stopping. There you go. Thank you.
So if your blood isn't boiling by now, there's something wrong with your central nervous system, right? Remember that quote from Alan Bloom, that University of Chicago professor who said back in 1980 that he could be assured of one thing, that virtually every student that comes to his classroom says truth is relative. It was 39 years ago. What you've been hearing for the last hour and a half is the result of that thinking. If having an XY chromosome and male organs and being able to produce a seed does not make you a male, what does maleness mean? It means nothing. The same thing with females. This is a flight from reason, ladies and gentlemen, and we need to pull it back. Now, this is the parent options section, at least I thought it was. And there's too much information really to give you, so I'm going to go through this very quickly, mainly by pointing you to some websites. There's 4 in particular. This conference is being sponsored in collaboration with Protect Our Kids, which is a ministry under Church United, and Informed Parents of California. We are partnering together to bring this message to you. If you want to be updated and be given continued information on what you're hearing tonight, register on those websites. For Protect Our Kids, I encourage you particularly to go to the Parents tab. That will give you all the options that you have as parents on how to remedy this thing. I also encourage you to go to the informedparents.org website and get on their Facebook account. As was mentioned to you, there's now 27,000 and counting parents and concerned citizens who are part of that network. We will make available either on the IPOC website or the POK website upcoming conferences in the future. So if you just go to those sites, you will stay informed. So go to those websites. Stop CSC is a very comprehensive website that will tell you all about comprehensive sexual education. And finally, you're going to hear about homeschooling in a minute. But if you're interested in homeschooling and you want to learn more about it after the presentation, the Homeschooling Association, Legal Defense Association is a fantastic organization to get information. So I encourage you to go there. Also, talk to your kids. How many parents here now have kids currently in K through 12, public education? A lot of you. How many in elementary school? Wow. You need to sit down and very adroitly, very sensitively talk to your children. Find out what they are being taught in school. Take notes after you speak with them. Document what you're hearing. Inspect the curriculum. You've heard about this. You have the right under law to call your school district and make an appointment and go down and find out actually what is in the CSC curriculum. But I would not stop there. I would demand that you see the textbooks that are part of the curriculum, but also ask them about the SOGI instruction, sexual orientation and gender identity, that is being taught and rolled out in social sciences, in humanities, in anthropology. We've even heard about it being taught in statistics classes. So ask your school district. I want to see everywhere that these topics are being taught. Document it. Make a note of which textbooks are being used and where it's being taught. Make a note of how forthcoming the school district is in giving you these materials. Document who you're talking to. Whoops. Vote. Now, I don't want to say this, but I'm going to have to. All the laws that you've heard about tonight, we have a supermajority in this state that is governed by one particular political party. And that party is responsible for virtually every law that we have spoken about tonight. If you are concerned about what you've heard, you need to be registered to vote. And unfortunately, at any particular time, only half California citizens are registered at any one time. And only half of those go to the polls in any particular cycle, such that only about 25% of adults that could be voting are actually taking advantage of their civil rights. You need to remedy that. And you need to identify which party you want to be responsible for your parental rights. We also encourage you to consider running for office. Consider that. We are a citizen nation. It's your responsibility. We are a democracy. You are responsible for governing our nation. We are a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Why has this happened? We've been sitting on our hands for 20 years. I personally have been involved in this effort for about 3 months. I had no idea how long this effort has been going on. Decades people have been preparing to roll this material out, while we've just wanted to go on and lead our quiet lives. This is a red line in California, and if you want it to change, each one of you need to step up and get involved. And if that means running for office, I pray that you will pray about considering that. There are great websites that can help you with that process. You can take a picture of this. Again, these websites are available on our POK website. learn about the political process and how to get involved. Opt-out. Ned has already spoken to you about that. There are some great forms. You can go to Pacific Justice Institute, but also the Parents tab on our POK website. We have a form available for you to opt your children out of this curriculum. And yes, according to Section 51932, it does say this chapter is immune from SOGI instruction. The particular opt-out form that we use actually cites other code sections in California, which should give you some rights to opt out of this entire agenda. So please look into that. Track legislation. Keep involved in what's going on. Monitor what's going on in the state of California. Here's a bill that's currently, I think it's held up in committee right now. It's probably coming back in December or January. It's Senate Bill 673. That bill does two essential things. It makes opt-in required for CSC for grades under 7. So they can't sneak it in. They cannot instruct your kids unless you affirmatively opt into the process. And number two, and just as importantly, you will not have to make an appointment with your school district to see this material. It'll be posted on a website, all of it. This is a bill that all of us need to get behind. Track legislation, I've spoken about that. Consider private or homeschool. I'm going to come back to private school in a moment, but before we do that, this next section regarding homeschool is very important for you to hear.
Well, thank you, Pastor Mark. All right, we do want to talk to you about homeschooling because it's a great option, and I'm sure several of you have thought about that now that you've heard some of these things. Linda Hayase is a former stockbroker, has homeschooled her 3 children the last 18 years from preschool through high school. Her eldest is a junior in college at Harvey Mudd, and her other 2 children are heading to college this fall. For years, she led a homeschool support group with over 100 families participating. Linda holds certification as an independent educational consultant from UC Irvine and today advises families on college admissions. Please welcome Linda Hayase.
Good evening. Well, tonight you are being armed with knowledge to help make informed educational choices for your children. And I would like to discuss an important and viable alternative that might be right for your family, and that's homeschooling. So what exactly is homeschooling? Well, according to Merriam-Webster, the definition of a homeschool is to teach school subjects to one's own children at home. Well, with all due respect to Merriam-Webster, I'd like to propose a modern and broader definition, and that is homeschooling is parents choosing to educate their children from a home base. Now, why is there a need to redefine the term? Well, as the number of homeschoolers have grown, at last count over 2 million children, parents have discovered a multitude of resources that are available. Instead of teaching all subjects at home, many parents now use outside sources as well, especially in the upper grades. So tonight I'll be covering why families choose to homeschool, how to establish a homeschool, some resources available to you, and a little bit about my family. So first of all, why do families choose to homeschool? Well, with the limited amount of time I have tonight, I'll just cover 4 areas. The first is academics. Homeschooling gives parents the ability to customize their children's educational journey. You may have a gifted learner. You might have a special needs learner. You might have a student who wants to take a wider breadth of courses that's available than through the traditional school system, or a student who wants to dig deeper in a subject. Well, homeschooling allows you that flexibility. How successful are homeschoolers? Well, according to the National Home Education Research Institute that recently did a study, home-educated students typically score 15 to 30 percentile points on standardized tests higher than their public school counterparts. And these scores were achieved regardless of their parents' level of income or their their parents' level of formal education or their family's level of income. And in addition, we're starting to see many colleges recruiting homeschool students. Another reason why families choose to homeschool is for socialization reasons. Now, when we first started homeschooling, people would always ask, well, what about socialization? And I would reply, well, it's because of socialization that we've chosen to homeschool, because what we're looking for is healthy socialization. And rather than interacting with students solely in their own peer group, homeschoolers tend to be very active in their community and learn to engage with people of all ages. The majority of students regularly participate in a variety of community activities. You can see them getting involved with field trips, church ministries, sports teams, volunteer organizations, political campaigns, and more. Many parents choose to homeschool to provide a safer environment for their children, free from physical violence, bullying, racism, drugs and alcohol, psychological abuse, and, as you've seen tonight, highly inappropriate content. And last but not least, many families choose to homeschool because they want a faith-based education for their children. So why choose to homeschool? Well, bottom line, parental rights. We believe that parents are the best advocates for their children's educational journey. So let's go over how you can establish a homeschool in our state. Well, under California law, all children between the ages of 8 and 18 must attend a full-time public school unless exempted. California parents may exercise one of 4 legal alternatives to homeschool their children. And by the way, we have all of this information available on handouts that you can take home tonight. Option number 1, children enrolled in a private school, obviously, are exempt from attending a public school. Well, the state of California permits parents to establish a private school based in their own home. Parents who choose to do so must file a private school affidavit or a PSA with the superintendent of public instruction between October 1st and 15th of every year. This PSA is available online, and in my experience, it only takes about 15 minutes to fill out. And there is no cost to file this PSA. Now, an important note, a PSA does not create your school. It does not mean you are requesting or receiving approval by the government, and it does not mean that your school is accredited. Filing the affidavit simply means that you are complying with Educational Code 33190, which requires the annual filing. So it's basically a declaration. Parents may choose to enroll their children in a private school satellite program. This is option number 2, otherwise known as PSP. Now, a PSP would file the private school affidavit on your behalf and on behalf of the families in the program. The PSP filing this affidavit must comply with the same legal requirements as those in option 1. And just a note that the PSPs may be comprised entirely of home-educated families, or they can be an extension of a campus-based private school. A less common option is the tutorial exemption, and this is a parent may hold a California teaching credential or employ a private tutor who holds a California teacher's credential for the grades and the subjects taught. And finally, families may enroll in a public, charter, or independent school program. Now, please note that for this option, these programs are publicly funded. So here's the California Department of Education's definition. A charter school is a public school that provides instruction in any combination of grades, kindergarten through grade 12. And the California Attorney General reiterates that charter schools are a class of public schools. Now, why is this important to note? Well, charters are no longer immune to AB 329 and will also be subject to the same comprehensive sexuality education mandates as conventional public schools, the curriculum that you've been hearing about tonight. In 2018, Governor Brown signed into law AB 2601, which extended the sex ed mandate to all charter schools. And charters are required to be in compliance by this coming academic year, so that's 2019 to 2020. So for this reason, I recommend that if you decide to inquire into homeschool groups, that one of your very first questions you should ask is, are you a private school or private homeschool, or are you a public charter? Again, be sure to ask, are you a private homeschool or are you a public charter? Forewarned is forearmed. So once you've made the decision to homeschool, what's next? Well, let's talk about some resources that are available to you. Most families want support, and the best way to receive it is to connect with one of the many homeschool groups that are available. We are blessed in California to have many resources, so please know that you do not have to go it alone. Now, if you enroll in a PSP or private school satellite program, you typically have a built-in network of other families. If you file a private school affidavit, like our family did, you still have access to other homeschool groups. And through the years, our family was involved with 2 homeschool groups, typically with 50 to 100 families. We also connected with other homeschoolers through church, a speech and debate league, many extracurricular activities. So homeschoolers are everywhere. Now, if you're not sure where to start, check out the list of resources that we'll be giving you tonight. And many of the organizations have a search function on their website where you can find a local group in your area. Curriculum is widely available. Homeschoolers not only have access to the same curriculum that private schools use, but we also have access to curricula that's designed especially for homeschoolers, and these have excellent content, ease of use, and often with the ability to use across multiple grade levels. There are classroom programs that are available to homeschoolers. These might meet once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week. Some use traditional textbook approach, and others use Socratic discussion approaches. A plethora of online courses are available. Some are in real time, some are self-paced. And there's a wonderful thing called a homeschool co-op, which stands for cooperative. And this is a group of families who get together to share in the work of teaching different subjects and planning activities. So you might have, say, a mom teaching math and maybe a dad teaching history, and people will take turns and trade jobs. Tutoring is an option, both online and in person. And finally, dual enrollment. It's a fantastic option, especially for high schoolers. All of my kids took dual enrollment classes through the community college while in high school, and thereby they earned both high school credit and college credit at the same time. It's a pretty neat thing. 2 key organizations that I would love for you to check out are the Christian Home Educators Association of California, or CHIA, and the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, HSLDA. They provide many resources, not only for new homeschoolers, but also for veterans. And also check out a homeschool convention. We're going to have 2 that are coming up. They're a terrific way for you to gather information, network with other families, attend workshops where you can hear from veterans sharing their wisdom. And my favorite part was going to an exhibit hall where you can actually see curriculum that's available to you. There are 2 major conventions coming up. One is the Great Homeschool Convention, which will be right around the corner in Ontario in June, and also the CHIA Convention in July at the Pasadena Convention Center. I wish I could bring up 100 homeschool families if we had the time to share their stories, because each of them would be unique. But tonight, with the limited time, I will share just one story, and that's of our own family. We started homeschooling as a leap of faith. Our eldest son had ADHD, and we were concerned about how he would function in a traditional classroom environment. Now, I came from a finance background, so it was really on-the-job learning. And as God blessed us with 2 other children, and we saw the effectiveness of homeschooling, we decided to embrace it as a way of life, and we never looked back. I have homeschooled our 3 children from preschool through high school, and we have tried nearly every approach I can think of. Some approaches work better than others, but we just kept charging forward. We joined homeschool groups. We started to go on field trips. We spent hundreds of hours at the city library. Our kids took outside classes, online classes. Some years we did co-ops with other families. When one of my kids had a learning challenge, we were able to focus on remediating it. When one of my kids had health issues, we were able to slow down schooling a bit and focus on healing. When one of my children craved advanced knowledge in a subject, God connected us with a professor in Georgia who not only taught lessons online, but also became a huge supporter of our homeschool and offered to write recommendation letters for college applications. And when my dad was battling cancer in another state and went into hospice, we took our homeschool on the road. My children were able to minister to him and spend their last months with Grandpa. And we learned precious, valuable lessons that were not found in textbooks. Now, my homeschooling season is nearing an end. Our eldest son just completed his junior year at Harvey Mudd College, which is a mile and a half from here. He's a computer science math joint major and is planning to apply to PhD programs. Our daughter will be heading to Azusa Pacific University in the fall. She's hoping to become an occupational therapist. And our younger son is graduating in 2 days. Yay! He has received multiple college acceptances, including 2 full-ride scholarships. He's decided that he's going to pursue his dream of becoming an Air Force pilot, and so we are supporting him in that goal. God has been gracious, and we have been blessed. But beyond academics, our family believes that homeschooling is really about relationships. We spent a lot of time together. And through the years, we've had ample opportunities to discuss the issues of life and faith. We were able to talk about different things like sex, but at appropriate times and in appropriate ways. And it's been challenging, but it has been worth it. And I'm here to tell you that if I can do it, if others around you can do it, with God's help, you can do it too. If God calls you to homeschool, He will equip you because He is faithful. Thank you.
We're almost there, folks. But since we're in a private school, we would be remiss if we didn't mention this as a viable option. I want to put up a case that goes back to 1925 because I think it's important to remember this. The fundamental theory of liberty, upon which all governments in this union repose, excludes any general power of the state to standardize its children by forcing them to accept instruction from public teachers only. The child is not the mere creature of the state, notwithstanding what the authors of AB 329 would tell you. Your children belong to God, and He entrusted them into your care to raise them as responsible adults. Homeschooling is a viable option. My wife and I are also the parents of 2 adult homeschooled children. And Linda is right. If we can do it, you can do it. But private school is also a very viable option, albeit sometimes an expensive one. But as you've heard tonight, there are no easy options. If we're going to overturn this law and bring sanity back in, at least with regards to health education in our public school system, this is a long battle that we're engaged in. It's not going to be toppled overnight. So in the meantime, we have to protect our children. Homeschooling is one remedy. Private schools is another one, but it can be costly. I got on privateschoolreview.com and came up with these figures. In California, the average elementary school cost annual tuition is about $11,000. For high school, it's close to $19K. When I was going to college, I don't think I spent this much annually. But that's what it is today. But, as Tip O'Neill said, just as all politics is local, all private school is local as well. And if you go online and do a little bit of a search, you can probably find a private school alternative in your area that is affordable, relatively affordable. There are 41 private schools within 5 miles of this zip code, 91711, 14 high schools, 31 elementary schools, and 21 preschools. And Michelle Browning, who is really the host of this event on behalf of Western Christian Schools, she didn't want to have any participation, and she still doesn't want to have any participation, lest she be accused of just hosting a conference to pull students into her private school. That is not what Western Christian School is about. But I demanded she have at least one slide to show you what they offer. So here it is. Take a picture of it. This is a wonderful opportunity for your children. And I encourage you to talk to Michelle about maybe the possibility of your children attending this wonderful institution. At this time, I think Pastor Tim is going to introduce our next speaker, Jim Doman of Church United, who's going to close us tonight. Thank you very much.
Well, as I said at the beginning, I'm a pastor at a church in Marietta. Do we have any other pastors here tonight? A couple of you, awesome. You need to talk to this man I'm going to introduce after we're done if you don't already know him. One more question. How many of you belong to a local church? Okay, here's what I want every single one of you to do. I want you to talk to your pastor and get your pastor connected with the man I'm about to introduce. Let me tell you why. 7 years ago, I had no desire to talk about any of this stuff because I thought pastors shouldn't get involved in politics. I thought pastors are supposed to preach the Word of God, and then all this other stuff is this other stuff. Well, this is what happens when pastors withdraw from the public square. Pastors need to be engaged. Pastors need to be teaching their congregations what is it that God says about these issues and how should you as a church respond to these issues. And I'll tell you, thank you. I got invited by Pastor Jim Doman of Church United to take a trip with them out to Washington, D.C. and find out how I as a pastor can start to get engaged in the public square. And it has changed my life radically. It's changed my wife's life radically. It's changed our church radically. And I say it changed it for the better. We have gotten involved in ways we never thought God would use us, and we couldn't be happier about that. And so The man I'm about to introduce has an anointing on him to be able to unite the church, to bring the pastors together. And since he started in just the past several years, he's got a network of pastors united together of all different types of churches, over 1,000 pastors statewide. Please welcome up Pastor Jim Doman, Church United.
Thank you, Pastor Tim. That was very kind of you. Well, we're going to close this out in prayer tonight. I'm going to get on my knees because the content you've heard tonight is just really, really difficult. This might be stuff some of you have been exposed to for the first time, terms, expressions, things that have done. Others, you may have participated in some of this stuff at some point in your life. And we have a Savior, and his name is Jesus. And he can cleanse, he can protect, and wash us. So I just want to pray that blessing over everyone. And if you guys could put my picture of my family up, that would be great. I didn't bring everyone tonight for obvious reasons. My wife is home with my children, but I'm a former homosexual. And I share that because God can redeem the things we do to ourselves or allow things to happen with us. And that's just a picture of us from this past Christmas of what God can do. So, honey, are you ready to pray?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your name?
Alaya.
And how old are you?
5.
Okay. So would you join us in prayer tonight? Go ahead.
Our God, who art in heaven, hallowed be my name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and give us our trespasses as we forgive us, and trespass against us. And please don't lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory of God. Amen.
Amen. Good job, CP. Lord Jesus, we just ask for your covering. We just pray the blood of Jesus over every person here today, over our minds, over our eyes and our hearts. And Lord, anything that is unsettled within us, Lord, we just ask that your blood would wash it away. It would cleanse us from all unrighteousness, Lord. Lord, and I'm just grieved that we're praying this prayer over adults and what children are exposed to, Lord, in our public schools. We just ask that your people would stand up to protect those who cannot protect themselves. So Lord, we just ask just an extra covering of protection over the families represented here, the children represented here by the adults in this room, Lord. And we just pray that we could transform this state for your son Jesus, and good and righteousness would be taught to children. And all God's people said, in the name of Jesus, amen and amen. Thank you for having us here tonight. Good night.